At my sister-in-law's wedding, my mother-in-law tried to mock my job by announcing I'm just a lowly waitress. Guests laughed. Then my boss walked in and said, "Actually, she owns the restaurant you're eating at." I grew up in a part of Georgia where the Spanish moss seems to drip off the trees like secrets. Small town, southern, and proud of it. My family didn't have a lot, but what we lacked in money, we made up for in hard work. My mom was a school nurse. My dad ran a fish shack down by the docks until he got too sick to stand for long hours. I started waitressing when I was 16, mostly because I needed to help out. It was the kind of job that made your feet ache and your back scream, but I didn't hate it. I liked talking to people. I liked moving around. And yeah, I was good at it. After high school, I tried college. I did 2 semesters of community college and then paused to take care of my dad full-time. He passed away when I was 21. After that, school didn't feel like the right path anymore. So I picked up more shifts at the diner I was working at, Mariner's Dock, and figured I'd see where things went. It was there that I met Reese. He was visiting from Atlanta, in town for a friend's wedding. Tall, soft-spoken, smart in that kind of way where he didn't feel the need to constantly prove it. He ordered crab cakes, asked me if they were fresh. I told him they were as fresh as you could expect from yesterday's batch. He laughed, tipped well, and came back the next morning. We hit it off in a way that made everything else fade into the background. We started dating long distance, then not so long distance after he moved to Savannah. He proposed under the old cypress tree in my mom's backyard. We had a small, beautiful wedding. I thought that was the beginning of a beautiful chapter. It was, in some ways, but it was also the beginning of my relationship with Margaret. Margaret was the kind of woman who made her judgments in the first 5 seconds and never let go of them. To her, I was a waitress with no degree, no pedigree, and no plans, someone who had married up. I was polite, even warm in the beginning, but her disdain was palpable. She'd make comments like, "So what exactly do you do all day?" Or, "It must be nice not to have a real job." Always in that saccharine tone that made it sound like a compliment. Reese noticed. He called her out a few times. It caused fights. Eventually, I asked him to stop. It didn't help, and honestly, I didn't want him in the middle. I thought, maybe if I just stayed quiet, kept being respectful, she'd soften. She never did. Over the years, I stayed in food service, but I also dreamed bigger. Quietly. At night, I'd sketch menu ideas. I started saving. I opened a high-interest savings account and stuffed it with every tip, every birthday check, every scrap of extra money I could find. 5 years into our marriage, I signed a lease on a small space in downtown Savannah. I spent months painting, cleaning, and building. My uncle did the carpentry for free. My cousin helped build the website. I called the place the Cypress Root, after the tree Reese proposed under. We opened with a small staff and a seasonal menu. Local food, Southern soul, and a whole lot of heart. The early months were terrifying. Some days we didn't even break even. I burned through my emergency fund fast. I'd come home, collapse into bed, and wonder if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But slowly we caught on. We started getting write-ups in the local paper. Bloggers showed up. Then magazines. We won Best New Restaurant in Savannah. A travel influencer posted about our peach-glazed pork belly, and suddenly we had lines out the door. Through it all, I never told Margaret or analyzed what I was doing. They still believed I was waitressing part-time and dabbling in food. They never asked, and I never volunteered the truth. Part of me didn't want to give them the satisfaction. Another part liked that they didn't know. So when Annalise got engaged to Wyatt, a high-powered tax attorney from Charlotte, I wasn't surprised that their wedding would be a full-blown gala. Custom suits, monogrammed napkins, engraved invites that probably cost more than my entire wedding. What did surprise me was that the event planner who handled their wedding, without knowing it was my sister-in-law's event, hired my restaurant for the catering. I didn't handle the meetings myself. My head chef, Monica, ran point. We have a separate event team, and I kept my name off all the paperwork. I didn't tell Reese either. I wanted it to be a surprise, or maybe a test. The wedding day arrived. Reese and I got dressed quietly. He looked handsome. I felt nervous. We drove to the venue, a massive 1800s estate with white pillars and sprawling lawns, and I tried to breathe through the tension in my chest. Margaret greeted us at the door like she was hosting the queen. She gave me a once-over and said, "You look comfortable." then floated away. The ceremony was beautiful, even if the bride looked like she was auditioning for a bridal magazine. Afterward, we were ushered to a reception tent strung with fairy lights and crystal chandeliers. The tables were draped in linen. The cutlery looked like it had been flown in from Europe. I spotted some familiar faces from my staff behind the buffet. Monica gave me a subtle nod. My stomach flipped. Dinner was served, wine poured, people mingled. I was mid-conversation with one of Wyatt's uncles when I heard Margaret tapping a glass. "I just want to say a few words," she said, standing near the head table. Her voice projected, polished from years of practicing superiority. "I'm so proud of my daughter today," she said, smiling at Annalise. "And I'm reminded of all the hard work it took to bring us to this moment. Everyone here plays a role, even those behind the scenes." She turned toward me. I felt it coming. "And speaking of behind the scenes, some of you may not know, but my daughter-in-law Talia has experience in the service industry. She's a waitress. Isn't that quaint?" A few guests chuckled. One man actually laughed out loud. I smiled tightly. Reese's hand tightened around my thigh. Margaret wasn't done. "It's a noble job," she said. "Really, we should all be thankful for people like Talia, bringing food to our tables today, just as she's done for so many strangers. What a lovely reminder of humility." Then she sat down, smiling like she'd just delivered a eulogy at a cotillion. For a second, I thought, just let it go. But then Monica appeared. She walked up to the table, leaned toward Margaret, and said calmly, "Actually, I don't believe you've met our owner yet. Talia is the owner of the Cypress Route. She's not just a waitress. She owns the restaurant that's catering your daughter's wedding." The silence was surreal. People looked at me, then back at Monica, then at Margaret. Even Annalise dropped her fork. And for the first time in 10 years, Margaret had no words. It took less than 30 seconds for the room to go from laughter to silence. And in those few seconds, I think I finally understood what dignity felt like. Not pride, not revenge, not gloating, but dignity. The kind that comes from standing tall in your truth when everyone expects you to shrink. Margaret's smile didn't just fade, it collapsed. Her face flushed a deep shade of crimson, and she stared at Monica like she'd just thrown red wine on her $800 silk blouse. But Monica, God bless her, didn't even blink. She turned and walked back toward the kitchen like she'd just delivered an order of dinner rolls. Reese leaned in and whispered, "Well, that's that." I didn't respond. My throat felt tight, not because I was upset, but because something in me had cracked open. Some old, bruised thing that had been buried under years of polite nods, tight smiles, and swallowing disrespect for the sake of family. Wyatt looked stunned, but to his credit, he raised his glass and gave me a small nod. One of his cousins clapped quietly, unsure if anyone else would join in. A few guests near us gave awkward smiles. Most just looked anywhere but at our table. Annalise didn't say a word. Her eyes dropped to her plate, and she started cutting into her food like it had personally wronged her. If she was embarrassed, she didn't show it. But then again, Annalise had always been the kind of person who moved past discomfort by pretending it didn't exist. After a few long, breathless minutes, the low murmur of conversation resumed, and the music picked back up. It was like the moment had been wiped clean, or at least, that's what everyone wanted to believe. But I knew it wasn't gone. I could feel the shift. People avoided Margaret for the rest of the evening. She kept to herself mostly, drinking champagne with the desperation of someone trying to drown reality. She made no further toasts. She didn't look in my direction again. After dinner, as the dancing started, a few guests came over to me quietly. A middle-aged woman in a navy blue dress told me, "That was handled with such grace. My daughter works in food service. I wish more people had your backbone." Another man asked for a card. He wanted to book a dinner party. I smiled, accepted their words, and kept my emotions in check. But inside, a storm of feelings brewed. Relief, disbelief, even grief. Because as satisfying as it was to finally be seen, it also cemented something I'd avoided facing for years. This family was never going to accept me on their terms. But maybe that was the problem all along. I had never needed to meet their terms. I had built my own. Later in the evening, as the music slowed and the crowd thinned, Reese and I stepped outside for some air. The garden behind the estate was dimly lit, quiet except for the soft trickle of a fountain and the buzz of late spring cicadas. He leaned against a stone wall, hands in his pockets, watching me. "You okay?" he asked. "I think so," I said, still letting it settle. I wanted to say something back there. I was ready to rip into her. I smiled at him. "I'm glad you didn't. It needed to happen that way. She'll never admit she was wrong." "I know," he paused, "but I hope you know you were never what she said you were, not even close." That made my eyes sting. I looked away, blinking fast, then said, "I didn't need her to say it. I just needed her to stop pretending." We stood there in silence for a moment. Then he added, "You know what the best part is?" I glanced at him. "She still has to pay the full invoice." That made me laugh. A real, from-the-belly kind of laugh. It felt good, too good. Like exhaling years of tension in a single burst. Inside, the music changed to a jazz cover of a pop song. People danced, clinked glasses, and posed for photos. Life went on. But for me, something had shifted permanently. When we eventually returned to the reception, Margaret was gone. Annalise had retreated to a circle of girlfriends who all looked like variations of herself, well-dressed, polished, and tightly wound. She didn't look at me when we passed. I didn't stop. The rest of the night, people treated me differently. Not like a caterer or the poor girl who married up, but like a business owner, a peer. It wasn't about status, it was about acknowledgement. And after 10 years of being talked down to, I felt seen. The next morning, as we packed up our hotel room, Reese's phone lit up with a message from his mom. Just a simple, "I'd like to speak when you're free." He showed it to me, asking if I wanted him to reply. I said no, not yet. Because it wasn't about what she'd say next. It was about what she'd already said, and what she didn't realize she'd revealed about herself. I was still thinking about it when I got a message from Monica. "Next time you let us cater your in-laws' event, can you at least warn me I'll be walking into a minefield?" I laughed and typed back, "Didn't want to ruin the surprise." She replied with a picture of the team loading trays into the van and a caption that read, "Best wedding ever." She wasn't wrong. And yet, even with all the drama, I couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, awkward, painful, and exposing as it was, had needed to happen. Because sometimes, people don't change until the truth makes them. And sometimes, the people who seem so sure of their place in the world get a lesson in humility from the very person they tried to humiliate. The days that followed were quiet, which in Margaret's world meant something was brewing. She wasn't the kind to let something go without at least trying to reassert control. I wasn't sure what she'd say when she finally reached out, or if she'd ever bring herself to do it. Part of me doubted she'd even be capable of saying, "I'm sorry," at least not without dressing it up in some strategic disguise. But I also knew Margaret didn't like being embarrassed. Not publicly. Not by me. Sure enough, 3 days later, Reese got another message. This time it said, "Would like to stop by to speak, just me." I told him she could come. I wasn't angry anymore. Just ready. I'd waited too many years for this family to see me clearly, and now that they had, I didn't feel the need to argue or prove myself anymore. I'd done that already, by building something real. She arrived at our house that Thursday afternoon, dressed in one of her high-collar cashmere sweaters and clutching a handbag that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Her lipstick was perfect. Her smile was not. "Talia," she said, stepping into the foyer like it offended her. "Margaret," I replied, calm. She sat in the living room without being asked, crossed her legs, and stared at me for a long moment. Then came the sigh, the performative kind. "I wanted to clear the air." I stayed standing. She continued, "I didn't know, obviously, about the restaurant, about you owning it." I raised an eyebrow. "That was the point." Another pause. "You could have said something." "I could have," I agreed. "But I wanted you to treat me with respect regardless. I guess I was testing if you would." That silenced her. For a few seconds, she just stared at the floor like it had wronged her. Then she cleared her throat and said, "I may have spoken carelessly at the wedding." "That's generous," I said. "You humiliated me in front of 150 people." Her jaw tightened. "But," I added, "I'm glad it happened." She looked at me, genuinely confused. "Because it reminded me that I don't need to keep trying to earn a place in a family that never really accepted me. I've got my own people now. My staff, my community, my customers. And Reese, of course." Margaret looked like she was about to object, but then stopped herself. "I'm not looking for an apology," I said. "Not if it's going to be just another performance. I've learned the hard way that not everyone is capable of self-awareness, but I also don't want this to happen again. Ever." I didn't come here to fight, she said sharply. I'm not fighting, I said. I'm stating terms. You want to have a relationship with me? Great. But you talk down to me again, even once, and I'll remove myself completely. That includes birthdays, holidays, weddings, everything. I won't allow myself to be insulted by someone who couldn't even acknowledge what I built. She pursed her lips, processing that. Understood, she said stiffly. Good, I said. Then we're done here, she stood. I'll speak with Reese later. You can speak to him any time, I said. But if you try to get between us again, it won't go how it did last time. She left without another word. And as the door clicked shut, I felt no fear, no anxiety, no dread, just peace. It was strange, peace wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, like a breeze after a thunderstorm. A few weeks later, I got a formal thank you card in the mail. From Analyze. It was stiff and impersonal, typed on ivory stationery, but the bottom contained a handwritten note. The food was flawless. I had no idea it was you. I suppose I should have. Congratulations on everything. No apology, just a glimmer of recognition. It was the most emotion I'd ever seen her commit to paper. I placed the card in the kitchen drawer, then opened my laptop and reviewed the photos our photographer had sent from the last charity gala we hosted. One of the last ones showed me standing next to Monica and our pastry chef, holding a check we'd donated to a local food pantry. That picture meant more to me than any toast Margaret ever could have given. Now, almost a year later, I only see Margaret at family gatherings, and when I do, she's polite. Measured. Like someone who knows she's been demoted from queen to subject and doesn't want to cause a stir. She brings desserts to Easter dinner now. Store-bought, but still, it's an effort. And the best part? The next time someone in the family got married, it was one of Reese's cousins. They asked if Cypress Root could cater again. This time, they asked me directly, with full respect and a healthy dose of reverence. I agreed. But this time, I made sure to personally handle the invoice and added a modest inconvenience fee for last-minute changes and guest requests. They paid it without question. Funny how quickly things change once people know your worth. And remember, if someone tries to shame you for honest work, just let them laugh. You'll get the last word when they're eating your food, paying your bill, and clapping for your success.